the summer of 2016, when I was preparing to return to Honduras, I did a evaluation of information that was present at that time at the on the website for the Department of State regarding activities it was engaged in Honduras. I was going to be in the capital city for a while, and I decided that I would look at what was on the Department of State website. And one of the things that was on the website at that time was a job offering. They were putting together a task force that specifically was supposed to focus on acquiring information about the narcotics trade in Honduras with an aim toward joint effort with law enforcement, including law enforcement in and through the United States. Now, were there to have been an appropriate disclosure of the outlays that had been set up in connection with my identity when I attempted to apply for college, then it would have been identified that the reprogramming that happened during the late 90s that could potentially have been impacted by and had an impact on a variety of other international matters ongoing was in direct line with what it was that was inspiring me to seek to return to Honduras at that time to be a teacher at a different school than the one I taught in previously. Insofar as there was anything at all legitimate about any efforts the Department of State had attempted to make in interceding in my life on behalf of or in the context of anyone, then they would have already acknowledged that that was my intent and that that was my interest and that I would have followed through on that just as I would have followed through on the other things to which I had offered to provide support. So at that point, it has to be understood anybody that represents themselves to be currently or previously involved with or through the Department of State, specifically in Central America, is going to be evaluated in that context. And that means that when sometime later, when I'm doing work to analyze appropriations, including appropriations regarding joint efforts regarding narcotics trafficking activities, and specifically any sort of cross-border cooperation in regards to counter narcotics trafficking activities, and especially insofar as they may have anything to do with chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons. That when those appropriations are revealed to me and a time frame that actually factors into a specifically understood process related to the federal budget, which I already knew about because I actually got formal documentation provided by an agency that works directly with Congress around the annual appropriations process that discusses the importance of timelines in that particular kind of term. Then presumably when I attempt to contact members of Congress with the information I have, they understand already that I have been entered into and am accountable to a long-term capital outlay process that has certain standards associated with it. It has certain benchmarks that need to be met. But if they fail to respond in the performance of their official capacities to assure that those timelines are adhered to, and those standards are maintained, then this justifiably brings up a consideration of what their actual interests are and what they're doing instead of performing official duties in association with what they represent as their official role. And so it's sort of one of these things where you can talk about trying to leverage, upstream risk with downstream liability in order to make it capital neutral at the most common denominator, especially after you've gone through a period of structural adjustments, which doesn't actually, as a terminology, apply within the United States the same way it does in other countries. I think they would call it, I don't know, economic stabilization or some form of economic recovery, or maybe they'll even say it's a bailout. And so in the course of that, when you have other cycles, including 10-year or 11-year cycles regarding the federal government giving assistance to a variety of financial institutions and banks that have only been able to deal with their situation in the way they were based on the forced pooling and the consolidated collateralization of so many other people, including people that were not directly and materially a part of what was previously a collateral pool for those people to draw on in order to deal with their financial situation. Well, you have a process that goes on for a year. And one of the things I've been concerned about is that what happened is that these big banks and these big companies were put in this sort of situation where they were distressed and they had a crisis. And, well, I mean, they were disabled, at least temporarily, because of the financial crisis. And so they got this assistance. And in the course of that, they claimed us. And so we were supposed to take on their psychosis. We were supposed to take on their disability. We were supposed to be the ones that internalized whatever it was that they were dealing with, including what informed the decisions they made about whether or not they were going to adhere to the law or they were going to break the law, or whether or not they were going to disclose up front something that might present a risk that somebody else would determine to be too great to actually engage them in a formal contract, including for short or long-term services, or whether or not they might engage in something that might be sort of ethically compromising to them because it would give them an advantage, or whether or not they would violate an explicit policy related to their work role because they had information that in another sector might advance them in terms of their upward mobility, or would be able to provide them with some sort of political capital that they could maybe invest in some sort of long-term solidification, or maybe even say, you know what, I'm not worth or as much as I actually am, and I'm not actually as capable as I am, at least in the way I'm representing myself to you, because I don't want to have to pay those taxes, and I don't want to have to be responsible for that. And so, I might let you do that. And I might let you go there and do that because I already understand that they have these other kinds of processes where I can abuse my role and I can say things about you in confidentiality that can later be used to condemn you so that somebody can try to acquire your estate or your work products through an illegal application of eminent domain after you've been condemned. And then because I've already got my place in the kickback pipeline with the corruptivos in the political structure, I'll be okay. And you're going to still be making the same problems over and over again. And we're only going to be able to keep you in our circuit long enough, to get certain things met, because after a certain point in time, you're going to become too expensive for us. We're going to have to move you on. I mean, that's exactly what the allegations were in 2008. You know that? Except it was the big banks. And they did a PSYOP for 10 years to see how many of us would internalize being Goldman Sachs, being Lehman Brothers, being AIG, being Citigroup, wearing the brand and becoming the brand, including with all of the ethical malaise, and including understanding that there are certain ways you can get away with certain kinds of crime. And there are certain processes and maybe even proprietary models. And, it makes a difference who's the first one to come in with the information and how it is that you're going to figure out how to get that information for yourself without having to pay their price, especially if they say their price is prosecution of criminal activity, right? I mean, nobody says, what job I really want? I want to be the person in the defendant's seat in a criminal racketeering case. I want to be the person on the other end of a congressional hearing accusing me of impeachable offenses. I mean, nobody applies for those jobs, right? You might, appoint someone? Assign someone? Do you think you can command someone to sit in that seat for you so that you can relativistically make yourself look better? Well, I mean, how much time do you need to establish your command post? Right? I mean, I'm just one person. I'm all in isolation. That means I'm either too big to fail or I'm a monopoly. Are you going to try to bring an antitrust case against me? Are you going to try to bring an antitrust case against me because I have a monopoly on a certain kind of political capital? I mean, at least then I would get to go to court, right? And you, as the person in the prosecutorial role, would have very different responsibilities than you would if you were to go ahead and avail yourself of your apparatchik network you've already set up so that you can try to repeatedly bust me down and strip me down and condemn me illegally, by the way, so you can steal what I've done. And then disperse it enough to try to remove yourself from the direct line of fire when it comes to establishing accountability or identifying who's actually criminally culpable in a chain of command, right? And so, are you going to sue me? Are you going to bring an antitrust case against Spacehawk LLC? Are you? Because what you've been doing is, it's apparently not very effective. I mean, I think that's really the only claim you have. You gave me no option for the last 2 years when it comes to being a public person than public comments at the Federal Reserve. And they're actually very, very, very valuable. But it wasn't supposed to be public comments at the Federal Reserve covering your ass on the overnight. Am I night court?